So in this year's budget, you can expect to see investments designed to further each of those goals. And I want to take a final moment this morning to explore one such critical area, a seed we will sow in this budget and from which in time we expect great things will come. That is social investment. Social investment is about driving better results from social services, particularly for our most vulnerable New Zealanders, who are too often failed by the status quo. It's about intervening early to prevent a child's life from veering off track. It's about fulfilling human potential. Because the sad reality is that despite successive governments investing in these aspirations, and currently investing more than $70 billion every year into good-intentioned social services, we are not seeing the outcomes we want. We can see the lack of appropriate support for the most vulnerable reflected in rises in welfare dependency, declining educational attendance and achievement levels, and rising rates of youth and violent crime. Social investment is a systematic way of using data, evidence, and modern analytics to invest in earlier and better intervention that breaks those cycles of despair. This year's budget will put in place the essential foundations to bring social investment to life. So today I'm announcing that we will establish a new social investment agency to replace the Social Wellbeing Agency, effective from 1 July this year. This standalone central agency will lead the development of social investment across government, helping us achieve better results from our social service expenditure with smarter use of data, evidence and analytics. We will establish a social investment fund as a vehicle for future social investments to be managed by the Social Investment Agency, with a brief to directly commission outcomes for vulnerable New Zealanders and to work with community, non-government organisations and iwi providers. The fund will begin investing in 2025, but I'm announcing it now as it will be a new way for the government to invest and it will take time to design. Over time, I expect the fund to grow in partnership with other funders to deliver at scale with a wide portfolio of investments. We will also establish a social investment board made up of real-world experts who will provide external challenge and guidance as we drive social investment forward. This work is of personal importance to me, and it's important to many ministers across our government. When I took the social investment proposals I've just shared with you to Cabinet, I suggested a small ministerial group could form and meet regularly to oversee the work. I was happily overwhelmed with requests from ministers asking to be added to that group. At latest count, we have more than 16 portfolios represented in the social investment ministerial group. I think this interest reflects how seriously ministers take the challenge of doing better with the social services that government funds. In closing, let me finish with my sense of optimism for New Zealand. This year's budget is a critical step in our plan to strengthen the economy and deliver New Zealanders the cost of living relief, higher incomes and better public services they deserve. We want our country to be a better place to do business, to invest, to innovate, to take risks, to build things, to make things, to hire people, to grow and to raise our children. And our government's approach to fiscal sustainability will be continued through future budgets. New spending initiatives will be targeted, effective and within our means. Our priority areas will continue to be hard-working, everyday New Zealanders and the frontline services like health, education and police that you rely on. Our plan will make New Zealand a much wealthier country where our people can earn more, live better and expect greater opportunities for our children and grandchildren. And I very much look forward to sharing this plan in full on Budget Day. Kia ora.
Fire away. Kia ora, Minister. Rob Bancroft, Robinson Research Institute. You spoke about the future, and at the heart of that future is high-value manufacturing and high technology. This valley has been at the heart of that and the nursery of many of those new industries. But we're at a critical point. A year's time to make the investment in the infrastructure and the technology in the background will be too late. We're at a really critical time. I wonder, is there any hope for the Valley in this year's budget, in what you might do?
Well, Tech Valley, as my friend Chris Bishop calls it, will continue to be Tech Valley and will continue to be a beacon, I think, not only for investment in manufacturing and design and engineering, but also a hub that brings together people with the research, the science skills, and the willingness to invest in businesses. So in terms of the hope that you ask for, I truly believe that one of the best things we can do to give people confidence about the future is let them know that we're doing our bit to lean against inflation so that interest rates can come down and people can feel confident about borrowing again. To give confidence that we will continue to invest in the public services and infrastructure that we all rely on, and to give you confidence that we see research, science and technology playing a critical part in New Zealand's future.
Minister Philip Berry with TDP Advisory. Congratulations firstly on your forthcoming budget and for delivering on many of those promises that you made. Great to hear the focus on social investment. My question though is about public sector cuts. No one likes to see people lose their job, but no one benefits from a bloated and inefficient public sector. So the question is, do you have a sense yet for how much further you have to go in that area to get back the government back focusing on its core business and delivering that effectively?
Look, as I said, we are confident now that the proposals we're progressing in our budget have delivered on our savings target. And what that involves is a combination of different things, in some cases reducing consultant and contractor spend, in many cases not filling vacancies, in other cases restructuring agencies. And you have seen that occurring in real time. And I share the same sentiment that you have, which is that any New Zealander losing their job is something that I think gives us all pause. What gives me confidence is that in our budget, I have been advised that when you tally up the new jobs we will create through our investments in frontline services, and the police and corrections officers and health workers and the like, that new job creation will be greater than the back office roles that we are disestablishing.
Quiet room. There's chance.
Minister, AAP's reported an increased focus on PPPs for funding infrastructure investment. Can you talk about the parameters around that?
Well, look, New Zealand has an infrastructure deficit. It's estimated to be more than $100 billion. And if you're living in the Hutt Valley, you can see that because we miss out on some of the areas that could be developed for housing because we don't have the transport infrastructure. Our commutes often take too long because we don't have the transport infrastructure. Whether it's schools, whether it's hospitals, there's a lot of investment that needs to be done. So our government's humble about the fact that we won't do it all by ourselves. We need to partner with private capital to get these big projects built, and that means exploring new ways of funding and financing these projects. And the good news is this is already normal around the rest of the world, so we're not having to reinvent a wheel. But absolutely, partnering with the private sector to deliver big projects, that's on our agenda. You know, something I'd like to see is more of our Kiwi savers being able to invest their own savings in big New Zealand infrastructure projects, instead of seeing an increasing share of New Zealanders' own savings being invested offshore. I think that, oh, yes, go for it.
So do you think the tax settings are right to balance the investment that we see into property versus investments in the business?
Well, look, we are really concerned about our housing challenges as a country. Housing has become progressively less affordable. Home ownership rates have declined. Rents have increased dramatically as a proportion of incomes. And I think it's to the shame of us all that last night, on average, several thousand kids went to sleep in a motel room. So we have to build more houses. And there's a number of things we have to do there. Partly it's about the planning, partly it's about infrastructure, partly it's about zoning. One of the other things we have to do is make sure the settings continue to encourage people to invest in building new homes. And you will have seen that Chris Bishop announced a policy to encourage build-to-rent housing, to bring in investment to build those homes. And I'm told that just with the tweaking of those investment settings, that there has been renewed interest in people coming to invest in that kind of housing in New Zealand. That can only be a good thing. If there are more rental properties, that's going to create more options for tenants.
Minister, in John Ross, in Lower Hutt here, the City Council come 1 July will be charging for an average home $85,000 in fees for every additional home that is built. On top of that, the actual cost of those homes is another $25,000 for detention tanks. And then you've got the H1 standards, which we, in this lovely Wolf one, we could argue aren't necessary.
Yeah.
And they are adding another $25,000. So for each home, you're around about $130,000, $150,000 in costs that could, well, they just go straight to the bottom line. This is without even constructing them. Have you got any plans to tackle those big costs?
Yes, we do. And you must be in the construction industry to have such a good detailed blow-by-blow of those costs. We want to make it much more affordable to build a home in New Zealand, because while land costs are part of it, when you compare how much it costs to build a home in New Zealand with how much it costs in Australia or just about any other developed country, it is too costly here. Now, as you highlight, there are a number of factors that go into it. Part of that is about the readiness with which our builders can get access to competitively priced building products, and we've got to fix some regulations up there. Part of it is actually about how clunky the consenting regime and the permission regimes got, and part of it is about the regulations. So Chris Penk, our Minister for Building and Construction, has been given a pretty clear task by the Prime Minister, and that is make the changes which will make it more affordable to build homes in New Zealand. And if you've got good ideas, which I sense that you do, about how we achieve that, look, I'd really love to put you in touch with him, because our view is that there are enough people involved in New Zealand who want to see these things become more practical. What we have to do is listen to them and put some of those ideas into action, instead of putting them into the too hard basket. Thanks for your question.
Hi, Minister. Artificial intelligence is taking off internationally. I'm just curious if there's any AI-specific investment plans or strategies for the current government.
Yeah, look, great question. I mean, when I look at the world, there are some things that I see as increasing challenges for the life that my kids will have. You know, they're growing up in a world with climate change as a reality, where there is more instability in the geostrategic environment. But I also see a world with massive opportunities, and I think we have to see AI in that light, because it actually has the potential to unlock significant productivity. So we've got a Minister for Digitising Government and also for Tech, and her name's Judith Collins. You may have heard of her. And she is passionate about the potential for AI. Now, what she thinks is important for a country like New Zealand is that we first get the ethical frameworks right and we think carefully about it, because no one will participate willingly in new innovation that uses AI unless they can be confident that their data and their privacy is being protected within an ethical framework. So she's doing thinking there. But I think we do need to think about AI in the context of digitising government as well. Too many services that New Zealanders seek to access online from government are still pretty clunky. And AI has the potential to make it easier for people to get the information and the services that they want. And so we do need to be thinking about that. And, you know, if you look back in history, it's new forms of technology that unleash revolutions in productivity, whether it was the car, the train, the computer, Google, and I like to hope that AI could be one of the next ones.
Thoughts on compulsory KiwiSaver? It's hugely disinflationary and it's investment in the long term in NZ.
Well, look, that's not a coalition government policy. I can only speak for my own party in terms of our thinking about that, but our view has been that many New Zealanders choose not to partake in KiwiSaver for a range of reasons which are particular to their circumstances. And while we maintain a really strong commitment to the supports that are in place to encourage people to enter KiwiSaver, we've been shy about compulsion. But I hear you. KiwiSaver is a positive thing, and having people participate in it, I think, is good for the country, particularly, as I say, if we can see more KiwiSavers able to invest here at home. Yes?
Will there be a liability recorded for the carbon credits we need to purchase to meet our NDC for 2030? Because I've just seen that there's a recent decision by the International Accounting Standards Board that recommends that that's now recorded for the emissions that are already taking place.
Well, look, I took some advice on that earlier this year, and the advice that I received from Treasury at that time was, for various reasons, they felt that it wasn't appropriate to record New Zealand's national development contribution as a specific liability. You'll appreciate they've had to give a lot of advice on this matter because it's an issue of debate between James Shaw and ministers in the previous government. So they were pretty confident in that advice, and I tested it. But look, you know, obviously we'll have to keep an eye on developments, including the one that you refer to.
Minister, you mentioned infrastructure earlier. We've seen a number of larger, somewhat costly projects that have been stopped that most people would disagree with. So the sector is looking at a short-term period of uncertainty with a promise of long-term development. What is your government intending to do to provide more long-term certainty to the sector so that investment can occur and we don't lose people that we're going to need?
Yeah. Great question, and this is exactly the speech that Chris Bishop's giving in Queenstown today. So the first thing that I'd say is I'll let the dollars do some of the talking, which is that in our budget we will commit an additional $7 billion in the multi-year capital allowance. I think of the multi-year capital allowance as the country's growth and resilience fund. It's about making sure that we've identified the investment that we will be making each year into furthering that infrastructure pipeline. Our approach in coming into government was to do a bit of a survey of where infrastructure development was at. And what we found was that there had been huge amounts of money allocated, but often in ways that were not very well connected to a rigorous business case, to a delivery plan, to a sequence. In some cases, the government was competing with itself for resources and inflating the cost of projects. So we've been pretty determined to get the delivery piece right. One of the big bits there is about consenting. New Zealand is a costly place to get permission to build something, and that both increases the time to build a project, but also the uncertainty and the cost of doing so. So our changes to resource management law, including the fast-track consenting bill, are pretty important in that regard, particularly when it comes to some of those significant national projects. The second piece of work we've given priority to is the government policy statement on transport, which sets out 15 major projects of national transport significance that we are committed to funding in concert with the private sector. And we've set those projects out to give people confidence about here's the pipeline of activity that we are committed to. And that also includes an ongoing maintenance and renewal program for our roads. Chris Bishop has been charged with the task of creating a practical 30-year view infrastructure pipeline, Because the point you make is the one that is raised with us again and again and again by those in construction and engineering and design, which is they would have more confidence about investing in their workforce and bringing over big bits of kit if they could see it wasn't just for the project in front of them, but for the next project and the next project. So we're working really hard to set out that pipeline and give people confidence and certainty in our investment frameworks.
Great to hear about that pipeline. Having spent close to 2 decades delivering and consenting key infrastructure in the UK, one of the major differences I saw here returning is the nature, scale and repetitiveness of business cases. What do you think we can do to get cross-party support on both the fundamentals of the infrastructure we need, but also the detail of the solution so that we don't need to keep reinventing the wheel?
Look, it's a question that we get a lot, and I think having that 30-year view is one of the important things, because there are some projects that I find it hard to believe any government would argue against, you know, when it comes to building the schools we need for a growing population, when it comes to ensuring we have health facilities to service the needs of an ageing population, when it comes to transport projects. So it's useful to have a pipeline set out so that people can have confidence that whatever government is there, some of the work will continue. But I've always been one who's a big fan of democracy, and part of democracy does mean that incoming governments do need to have the right reserve to say, well, we're not going to do that project, we're going to do this one instead. And I recognise that that can be frustrating, but it is the will of the people, and democracy is the worst form of government except for all the others. So, you know, I'm a fan of it myself.
Yeah, we have an ageing population in New Zealand that's going to have increasing financial burden. How does this government want to deal with that? Is there going to be anything in the budget to deal with it?
Well, look, you're right. That is one of the long-term fiscal challenges that we will face, one of the long-term population challenges we face. I think one of the most important things we need to think about in relation to it is the productivity and efficiency of our health system. Because actually, one of the major costs that comes with an ageing population is the delivery of additional health services. And so it's going to become very important, I think, that we have health services that use the best that technology has to offer, that are productive, that are constantly looking for new forms of efficiency, that adopt medicines that have breakthrough impact well. So we are, as a government, doing a lot of work alongside the Health Minister, Dr. Reti, on thinking about how we make sure that our health system is evolving to that growing demographic challenge. I think the other thing that is always present, and we should never lose sight of, is the best way to be able to afford more of the things that we need and want, including support for our elderly citizens, is to grow this economy. Because growing economies are wealthier economies with more revenue, more choices, and better support for people.
I'm going to ask one, maybe 2 more questions.
Sure.
Minister. The first
I have to say, these questions are much sharper than the ones I face in Parliament.
You mentioned roading earlier, and part of the announcements around that were around funding Malling, the Cross Valley link here in and Tauranga to Granada. Can you give us a wink or a nudge as to what level of funding we might see in the next year in your budget for these, or is that too top secret?
So my wink is that the MP for Hutt South, Chris Bishop's been a major fan and sponsor of those projects and has made significant personal commitments about them. And my nudge is that he is the Associate Minister of Finance and the Minister for Infrastructure.
So it's all on Chris, that's great. The second question is regarding water. And so water in New Zealand has been a very topical issue for quite some time. It's a major driver of costs, both nationally and locally. And we hear our local council up and down the country, they're telling us that the major driver for their increases in rates and costs comes from funding water. It's obviously not your portfolio, it's an expensive issue though.
Yeah.
Does that fit within your current budget?
Look, it's really important, and you will have seen at the weekend we made an announcement about new arrangements for water care in Auckland. And the important thing there is that we've now given confidence to both Auckland Council and Water Care that they can hold those assets off the Auckland Council balance sheet, which will both allow Water Care to borrow more, but will also give Auckland Council more headroom. And so the result of that is that there is now renewed confidence about the investment in Auckland's pipes that can occur, and confidence to ratepayers that their rates aren't going to increase as much. Now here's the thing. The last government spent $1.2 billion investigating ways to achieve that, and I can tell you we spent a lot less than that on coming up with a practical solution for Auckland. At the same time, we have been working on what the models need to look like for other areas of the country, and I think what you've seen here in the Wellington region is a willingness by our local councils to explore new ways of working together to deliver water infrastructure more effectively. Our approach is about having a good economic model in place that requires water entities to set out what investments they will be making over the medium term. That also ensures there is local ownership and control retained, but giving those entities the ability again to hold those assets off balance sheets so they can do longer term borrowing for what are longer term assets. We're making really good progress. We'll be in a position to make detailed announcements soon.
Just a question on the income tax relief and tying it back to inflation. So if the income tax relief was repurposed to pay back borrowing or reduce borrowing, do you know how quickly it would bring inflation back in line with the Reserve Bank's advice?
No, but what I can say is that would be a major breach of a commitment that we have made to working New Zealanders. And I, along with my colleagues, looked many people in the eye during the election campaign and pledged to them that we would stay by their side and we'd be at their back. And some of those people have watched while their purchasing power has been eroded. They've had panic attacks in the grocery shopping aisle. And one thing that we promised them we would deliver was letting them keep a bit more of their own money. And that remains a priority for us.
Nicola, you've spoken a lot about things you're going to do to help the New Zealand economy internally. New Zealand is primarily a primary exporter in terms of generating overseas revenue. So what cutting plan do you have to adjust to what our research has shown is a global market which is turning down? The bond markets are in a mess, the global sort of financial and fiscal markets are a mess. What sort of plans does the government have to increase productivity of New Zealanders, because currently we've got the lowest productivity in the OECD, and also to mitigate any global sort of factors that are going to prevent you doing what you want to do?
Yeah, well, look, there's a few bits to your question. One of the things you rightly identify is that there are challenges across the global economy, and we're conscious of that. And I could stand here and talk for 5 minutes about all of the problems and complain about it, but I prefer, and our government prefers, to focus on the things that remain within our control. You will have seen a concerted effort by our ministers to be visiting countries around the world with whom we think we can build stronger trading connections. This is an important point because what New Zealand needs to have is a diverse range of markets to which our exporters can send their products and from whom they can extract greater value. I continue to see a really positive story for New Zealand primary producing exporters. Our quality food remains in high demand. It is seen as safe, it is seen as sustainable, it is seen as high quality. So I think we need to focus on that agriculture story as a story for the future. At the same time, of course, we need to be across a diverse range of modern sectors and industries, and we see great potential in software as a service, in aquaculture, in some of the service industries that have started to flourish here. In terms of the productivity question, if I had that silver bullet, I would fire it straight away, I promise you. I think actually there's kind of 5 main things that drive productivity. One is education. We have to get better at that. The fact that educational achievement has been plummeting so quickly should be of deep concern to us all, because what's the number one predictor of the productivity of your economy? It's the education and skills of your people. So we have to get education right, and our government's very focused on reform there. I think delivery of better infrastructure will better support productive growth. We need to ensure that we have a better regulatory environment, that we are more open to overseas investment and capital. There is a clear connection with how closed our economy has been to capital and how that's constrained our firms. And we need to make sure that, as I say, we're focusing on that trade, that investment, that international connection. And to your point, sir, getting that research, science and technology piece right, which is, yes, about the targeted investments, but also about keeping our regulatory environment up to date. You know, the fact that we haven't had a biotech regulator means that our primary industries have had to wave goodbye to a lot of great IP and good thinking that might otherwise have been developed in New Zealand and added value to our own exports. So no silver bullet, lots we can do. I can tell you, underneath everything in our economic plan is that goal. We've got to improve productivity in New Zealand. Thank you for being the person who asks about it. Great. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Minister. When you talk about there being a 40% increase in spending over the 14 years since the last tax threshold changes, it makes it very hard to disagree that it's needed and it's happening, so thank you. I want to particularly touch on a point you talked about around social investment, and it's an area that I think many New Zealanders don't understand. And I remember when it was first explained to me that the description was fair is not the same as equal. Fair is not the same as equal. And so giving everybody in New Zealand the same thing isn't necessarily fair. And the best example I came across was every New Zealander receiving free prescriptions sounds great. But why is somebody in New Zealand earning $200,000 a year getting their $13 prescription paid for instead of taking all that money and putting it somewhere where it's better? And so that taking the money and distributing it where it works best as opposed to giving every single New Zealander the same thing just seems to make sense to me. I think when we look at it as business owners and business managers in this room, the idea of targeting your money where it works best just makes sense. And so I'd encourage all of you to learn more about how the social investment structure works. It's a word we've heard before in my experience in talking to people, is that most of us don't really understand what it means. So I'm looking forward to hearing more over the coming years as to how it works and seeing it deliver more. Thank you again, Minister. We would all have loved to have heard more detail. I appreciate it. Several more weeks until the budget date itself, and you've got more work to do. Yeah, we're looking forward to that, and lots of coffee in your office, I'm sure. Look, thanks again to Gibson Sheet, our platinum partner, for supporting both today and our ongoing political series. We have more through the year, so keep an eye on what we're doing. As a chamber, we are running again a full program of events. If you haven't yet grabbed the chamber app, I encourage you to do so. All our events are on there. You'll see them in our weekly news email that you receive, and of course on our website. For those of you that have seen me speak before, you'll be expecting my plug for membership. Here it goes. Most of you are members. We very much appreciate and value the small financial contribution you make every month to our operating costs. Some of you are not. Shame on you. There'll be a desk at the exit where you can... No, there won't be. But I encourage all of you that aren't yet members to join. It's $25 a week and up. It costs very little. It makes a huge difference to us. It means we can be out there doing the thing that you need us to do, which is to fight your good fight. We are regularly talking to ministers, agencies, local government, making sure they understand the business perspective, that they hear what's important to you, that they understand the things that are obvious to you are not always obvious to them. They live in a different world. So we're a really important part in that. We spend many hours, days, and we drink lots of coffee to do that too. And so I encourage you just to consider A, continuing your support of us, and B, if you're not yet, to add your little bit of dollars to our operational support. There's the plug. You'd be disappointed if I didn't do it. Again, thank you very much. I hope you are all equipped for the rain. It's still raining outside, I can see behind you, so run to the cars on your way out. Do stick around for networking and meet up with those people that you've met here before that you want to see again, and maybe there's some people in this room that you've not met before that you'd like to meet, so stick around if you can before you head off to your day. Other than that, go out there, do some great business, and we'll see you next time. Thank you.
Bright and early, I really appreciate it.
Just on what you were talking about with the cuts, you were saying that basically you found everything that you were looking for there. Does that mean that's the end of the job losses, that train has left the station?
Well, what it means is that all agencies have been given a final answer as to what their savings need to look like, and then they can plan with confidence about the future.
So how many agencies have been exempt from the 6.5 or 7.5 percentage point cuts to their budget?
Well, you will have seen we previously released a list of all of the agencies and their targets. There are a few agencies who have not met their target, and that's for good reasons. So, for one example, the New Zealand Police. They were able to convince us that reaching their target would involve potentially making changes that would undermine their frontline service provision. So we just weren't prepared to go through with that. That meant they didn't reach their target, but at the same time, as I say, there are other agencies who went above and beyond their target. And so what that means is there are some unders, there are some overs. Altogether, it adds up that we will deliver the savings we promised.
So police, who are the others?
I'm going to leave some of this to budget day for you to see. Look, one other example I'm happy to talk about today is that Whaikaha did not make savings this year. Oh, look, they have made a contribution to the savings, and that's the right thing because they identified they did have consultant and contractor spend, they did have the potential for back office efficiency, and it's been really good to see that approach across agencies.
Now that you've met the goal, can you give an assurance that there will be no more budget cuts, no more job losses?
Well, what I've always said is that our focus is on delivering better frontline services. What that doesn't mean is that we promise to never change things or do things differently or do things better, because we don't accept that the status quo is working for everyone, and so we can't keep things the way they are. So we, in future, of course, we will make changes to government agencies if we think they're needed to deliver better results for New Zealanders.
How far into the future will that be? Because there have been such deep cuts now, people will be worried as to when they might expect further cuts. So what sort of reprieve period can people expect?
You can expect our government to have an ongoing focus on making the most of every taxpayer dollar. And you've got to remember the context here. We've had more than 16,000 public servants added in just 6 years. And I can tell you that our reprioritisation will go nowhere near that number.
So the message is you will make more cuts if you need to?
No, the message is I pledge to every New Zealander that when we are in charge of your money, we will always look to drive the most value from it. That will mean having public agencies that can support frontline services, that are doing innovative things. But I promise that the state of always looking, can we do it better for you? That's going to keep going.
There were some of the agencies that found more than they needed to.
Well, I want to keep that for budget day, but what I did do today was highlight some examples where every single dollar has gone back into the front line. So an example there is the Ministry of Education. They have done significant work to identify consultancy spend that they could reduce, to identify programs of activity that, while they were well intended, were not delivering maximum value, to find back office savings. And every single dollar of that is now going to be reinvested in the front line, and that means more money for our early childhood services, more money for our schools, more money for our tertiary providers, and that's exactly what we promised New Zealanders we would do, and I'm really glad we're delivering it.
The 3% figure in your speech, is that the other 17%, is the fact that they're missing out a result of the fact that not everyone pays income tax, or is that a result of changes that you've made between what you campaigned on and what you're actually delivering?
The former.
In terms of just going back to the cuts, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, are they one of the agencies that hasn't met the 6.5% threshold?
The Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade has delivered some savings.
But is it 6.5%?
The Ministry of Foreign Affairs and Trade has delivered some savings, and you will see the overall quantum of those savings on budget day.
Why are they exempt? I can understand police.
They're not exempt. They were given a target. They have worked on their target and they have delivered savings.
What was their target?
They had a target of 6.5%.
So they
Defence, I would want to check that. I think they may have, because there was a difference between the Defence Force and the Ministry of Defence, so I just want to check that. But what I can absolutely confirm for you is that Defence have made some savings. However, again, like education, the overall quantum of investment into defence will increase in this budget. So every dollar of savings that we have found will be reinvested in new equipment and increased funding for defence services. That is an area that we have prioritised for a modest investment. In the longer term, we want to see more significant pickup in investment in that area so that New Zealand can contribute effectively to our global partnerships. And in this budget, you'll see a modest uplift.
Modest investment.
Yes.
Are we going to get much closer to 2% or 1.4%, 1.5%?
Well, the Defence Minister's immediate focus has been on a capability review to ensure that when we make those investments, we invest in the right things. So it's important that we have the right kit. That means that we can be helpful to our Pacific neighbours when they need us, but also that we can work well with those countries we're in security relationships with. And so that means identifying really carefully what's the equipment we should be getting. Is it the right stuff, and not contracting vast sums of New Zealanders' money for things that aren't actually the right things for the future challenges New Zealand will face.
Can I just be really clear on the MFAT fact? Was their target 6.5%? You said it was their target. Have they met that 6.5% cut?
I'm not going to go through every agency today and tell you whether or not they met their target. We will make that absolutely transparent on budget day. You will see what their target was, what they delivered, and how that lines up with other agencies, because I recognise that it's in the public interest for people to see that. I'm just going to leave that to budget day.
I'm a little confused because I thought everybody had a 6.5%. It was across the board, and now you're saying they had a different target?
No, everybody either had a 6.5 or 7.5% target, depending on what their headcount increases had been in the past few years. What I've also said is that some agencies delivered on their targets, some agencies didn't deliver on their targets. Some agencies went above and beyond their targets. So it's been a matter of, here's your target, but I never said that that was an absolute. Some people, when they put forward the proposals that were needed to meet that target, our judgment was, actually, we don't want to progress all of that.
So did MFAT meet that absolute target?
MFAT delivered savings, and you'll see exactly how many on budget day.
Well, can you just expand further on that comment that this budget will, your efforts will create as many jobs as had been cut?
So what I asked the Treasury to do together with the Public Service Commission was a bit of an analysis of how many roles that they thought would potentially be disestablished as a result of the savings exercise that we have run. Now, obviously, that's not final because many of those proposals are still under consultation. So they've given me a rough guide at this point. And then what I also asked them to do was look at the investments we're making in the budget, 500 extra police, investments in the correction service, significant uplift in funding for the health service, funding into our schools and ECE centres. And I said, can you calculate for me roughly how many roles you think we're creating? And what those indicative numbers show is that the latter number is bigger than the former number. That is, we're creating more frontline roles than we are disestablishing roles through the savings exercise.
And is that
to make that comparison, because a lot of those new roles, they would have been created regardless. Not all of them would have come from back office savings being reprioritised to the front line. So is it a bit cheeky to kind of make it?
There's nothing cheeky about an extra police officer, an extra nurse, or an extra corrections officers. That is a real job for a real person, and it's us delivering on what we said we would do, which is prioritising frontline services.
But is it a bit apples and oranges? I mean, the people who are losing their jobs aren't all going to become police officers.
No, and I'm not arguing that. I'm just simply saying that while our budget is doing what we said it would do, which is reducing spending in public sector agencies where there has been significant growth in the back office, at the same time, our budget is also creating public service roles. The nature of those roles is different.
And when you talk about the roles disestablished, is that including the roles that people weren't in that have been cut, or is it literal jobs that have been disestablished? Do you understand that?
Yeah, look, that is a really good question. So there's a number of things going on, something I have noticed in Stuff's coverage, is that sometimes they are conflating restructures or programs of activity that were set in action before we came into government, or proposals that have been long planned by departments. My number relates to role reductions as a result of the savings exercise. What I am working on, because I recognise, again, this is something that people will be interested in, is making sure that we can carefully articulate that number in a way that is transparent. I also want to do that in a way that's respectful, so I am waiting for the consultation exercises which are underway to continue in good faith. It's really important that we let that happen.
Do you have a rough number at the moment?
Is it too data-driven and does it lack a human touch?
It is all about a human touch. We fail too many New Zealanders because we don't have the rigour of saying, is the service we're providing working for you? It is not enough to have good intentions and to have a warm heart. You actually have to make a difference to people's lives. And the truth is, there are some programs in our communities which are incredible and have delivered amazing results. There are other programs that aren't quite as effective. And we owe it to every New Zealander to make sure we're dialing up the things that are working and we're dialing down the things that aren't working as well, so we can use those precious dollars to make more change.
If the social investment approach was operational currently, do you think we'd have less people on the benefit?
I think if it was up and running, yes, we would have less people on the benefit, because fundamentally we would be breaking cycles of disadvantage earlier in people's lives.
You mentioned that 16 portfolios were keen to get involved in this agency. Can you give examples of which ones are already on board?
Oh, well, the Minister for Whānau Ora, the Minister for Disability Services, the Minister for Oranga Tamariki, the Minister for Education, the Minister for Corrections, the Minister for Police. Just about everyone with a portfolio that touches people with social services on the front line wanted to be involved, because all of us, I think, as ministers, as New Zealanders, have the same frustration, which is, of course, if we could prevent a child offending so badly that they need to be going to a military academy, if we could wind back in their lives 15 years and make an intervention that would actually see them developing their potential better, see them going on a better pathway in life, we would make that intervention every day of the week. But the problem is, successive governments have had good intentions in this area, make a range of investments, but don't do enough to measure what's working and make sure that we're dialing up the things that make a difference.
Labor will say that, well, we continued on with the agency, they rebranded it the Social Welfare Agency, forgive me if I've got that incorrect, but and that, you know, that work has continued. What do you say to that?
Well, I'd just say the proof will be in the results. I remember the frustration of asking questions at Select Committee about what changes had been made using a social investment approach. And I can't recall Labor pointing to any. And I take the challenge on board, which is actually social investment will be judged by the investments that we make and the difference that they make.
Would you expect an outcome within the 6 years there and going?
So the reason I am making the seed investment in this year's budget is so that we can have social investments up and running in next year's budget, set up with an analytical framework and an evidence-based approach so that you can judge for yourselves whether they're working. Now, here's the thing. Some of them might not work, but the difference is we need to be honest when we're not and flip to the things that are working quickly.
How long does it take, though? I mean,
For the whānau ora commissioning agencies, is there any thinking, any discussions at the moment about where they will sit as part of the social investment agency?
Yeah, look, I have been having a lot of discussions with Tamapōtaka, the Minister for Whānau Ora, about the alignment and the approach between what Whānau Ora does and what we want social investment to deliver. I think one of the strengths of Whānau Ora has been that it's not about a big government agency coming in and doing a one-size-fits-all approach. It's actually about grassroots organisations building trust with individual whānau and using those relationships to make a range of interventions. It's quite possible that we would work with those Whānau Ora agencies to deliver some social investments. Not in the first instance, no. No, it's not even on my agenda, Mikey.
In your speech, you mentioned the dread that you felt hearing the forecasts. You talked about it being the darkest before the dawn. I mean, in terms of this budget, are you underselling how bleak it's going to be, or is it really going to be a grim set of documents?
Well, I think you only need to talk to New Zealanders to know that the economy hasn't been in great shape. You can't have inflation as high as it has been for as long as it's been, and interest rates this high without seeing some effects. And if you look at the monthly financial statements, which we have published, they show that the corporate tax take is well down on what was forecast. That's because businesses are making far fewer profits because the economy is not going as well as the government had forecast. So I do expect that high interest rates and high inflation will continue to take a toll on New Zealanders. And I think I owe it to people to be honest about that, upfront about that, and not to pretend that on the 30th of May I'm going to deliver a document that will solve everyone's problems overnight and wipe every tear from every eye. But what I will do is deliver a plan to get us out.
And you said that there's, I can't remember what it is, I'm sure you'll correct me, 20 sleeps till the budget.
Yeah.
How much sleep are you actually going to get? Because it sounds like it's weighing on you quite a bit.
Yeah, not enough sleep, Jason.
Is it disappointing not to be able to have the financial parameters in the first budget to be able to do some of the things that maybe you've been dreaming about doing when thinking about getting this portfolio?
I think New Zealanders voted for us knowing we're good at doing clean-up jobs, that we're good at making more of less, and that's the job that we're doing. And if we do that job well, there is such great prospects ahead, because actually if we grow the economy, we give people more confidence, we will have more wealth, we will have more opportunities to invest for the future, we will have more choices for New Zealanders. So that's what it's all about, and look, I don't spend a day complaining about the choices we face. It is way harder to be a person in the squeeze middle worrying about the groceries, worrying about the rent, than it is to be the finance minister.
What's your response to reportage around Treasury advice in 2016 saying that fiscally neutral changes are not counted against the operating allowance? You've said that you're funding the tax cuts out of the operating allowance.
We are funding our tax reduction out of our operating allowance, and we are delivering them in a fiscally neutral way.
And what do you say to the Treasury advice, though, that says that you can't, fiscally neutral changes can't be counted against the operating allowance?
Look, I'd have to see the full advice in its context to understand what it's saying. What I can tell you absolutely and very confidently is we're delivering our tax reduction package within a smaller operating allowance than had been forecast by the previous government, that we will fully fund our tax reduction through savings and revenue measures, that they will be fiscally neutral, and therefore, on the advice that we've received, will be less inflationary than government spending.
Are you able to explain just how that works? So the tax package is, $3 or so billion a year, right? So your new revenue measures and your cuts are worth that amount, and then you've got a 3.5 less operating allowance, and that is the new spending that you add to departments. Is that how that works?
Well, it's more simple than that, really. We go into the budget with an operating allowance of new funding that we've committed to investing. We then have savings that we have identified that add to that amount of cash that's available. We then have revenue measures that add to that cash that's available. We then have reprioritisations that add to that cash that's available. We then take that amount of money and we say, well, this much is going to tax reduction, this is going to health, this is going to education, and altogether it means that we are not needing a larger operating allowance of new money than the last government.
So the total pool is about $7 or $8 billion.
I'm not giving you numbers today, but nice try.
And just that nugget about Treasury telling you that the multiplier on tax cuts is lower than spending, is that new? In the past, I've heard Treasury kind of not really take a view on which one's better or worse.
Well, you can imagine I've been really interested in this question as we've developed our budget, because it has been the advice that I've previously received and that I've read, that where tax reduction is delivered through reprioritising what would have otherwise been government spending, that it can be disinflationary. So that is a question that I have engaged with Treasury on, and the advice that I shared with you today is the advice they've given me.
Minister, just on defence, at a time where you're prioritising a lot of savings, cutting jobs, it's clearly a big message to be spending money on defence. Why do you think, given everything that given the limited amount of money and everything that you spend, that you're spending on defence?
Because unfortunately we are living in a far less stable world. We face genuine threats, and we owe it to the countries we work with to be making our contribution. We owe it to our Pacific neighbours to be able to be there when they need us. And I had a really sobering experience recently. I went to a dinner in DC with finance ministers from around the world. On one side of me was the Ukrainian finance minister, literally in an existential fight for his nation's future. And on the other side of me was the Polish finance minister, who is spending 4% of his GDP on defence. And those were not realities just a few years ago. And so New Zealand needs to be sober about that reality. We need to be safe. And so it's important that we take responsible decisions to make the investments required.
Is this about increasing New Zealand's deterrence capability, or is it about literally building our defence force from the ground up?
Look, the Defence Minister is obviously the best person to talk to about the capability build that we are doing. As I've said to you, we're looking at a modest uplift in this budget, but we recognise there's a bigger piece of work to do about what are those long-term capability requirements that we have. And as I've said, part of that is about how we turn up in our own backyard for our Pacific neighbours. Part of that is about being interoperable with our defence partners. And part of that is about looking after our own piece of ocean. As I say, the Defence Minister is engaged in that exercise. She is the best person to talk to about the detail of it. But we recognise that relative to many other countries, New Zealand hasn't been investing that much in defence.
Sorry, really, really quickly, why did you guys block the legislation to, or the bill to increase Peter Bosch's term or the age limit restrictions on the Ombudsman?
Oh, look, we just view that it's not appropriate to make an entire law change based on one individual.
He's a pretty good individual, though.
Yeah, I like him. Yeah. I like him.
Is there a scope to extend his term in other ways? Is there some sort of loophole?
No, look, he is there now, and that sits within the legal framework, and he will be there until we find a replacement.
So could you just not find a replacement for him as long as you like?
I think the appointment sits with Paul Goldsmith, and it's his intention to find a replacement.
Thank you.
Thank you.